right, I'm going to go ahead and call this confirmation hearing to order for Josh Durand as Director of Parks and Rec. Let's go ahead and do introductions, starting on this side.
Pete Peterson. John Weddleton.
Thanks, Alpha.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant.
Felix Rivera.
Josh Durand.
All right. So let's go ahead and start off with introducing yourself, though I think we all know you.
Okay. How brief or
Whatever you want. Whatever you want to let us know.
So on the Myers-Briggs, I'm SPJ. I was born on the East Coast. My family moved to Valdez when I was in second grade. We then found ourselves in Anchorage, Alaska. When I was in sixth grade, my dad was a programmer for a bunch of different oil companies. And we lived on Kane Street in South Anchorage. I went to St. Elizabeth. I was a Boy Scout in Troop 104. I spent a lot of my summers at Camp Gorsuch, just right next to Mirror Lake. I then transitioned into Service High School. I played soccer, I played baseball, I raced downhill skis, I was a mountain bike racer with my father for a while. In high school, I was an employee at Bell's Nursery, O'Malley's on the Green, and Evergreen Landscaping. A lot of that was influential in my career choices. My mom is an artist. I have a strong interest in art. I decided to become an art student at UAA. I then started to realize, how am I actually going to have a career with that? I had this interest in landscape at the same time. I then found myself in Colorado State in the landscape architecture program. Saw that as a good combination. I had friends from Service High School that were there in the forestry program. Got a degree there. Then I started working at landscape architecture firms, design build firms in the greater Denver metro area for 10 years. One of my positions there was extremely influential in how I look at the designed and built landscape today, and that was, there used to be an airport in Denver before they put it in Kansas, and the airport was Stapleton, and that this company from Florida redeveloped that entire thing, Forest City Stapleton. And they took a completely different approach, at least in the moment, of how they were developing that space. They were thinking about people instead of automobiles. So automobiles had alleys, people had sidewalks, trails. They had miniature town centers throughout the entire development where everyone could walk to a park, everyone could walk to a trail, everyone could walk to a restaurant, a grocery store. And it really was influential in how I looked at the designed world that we live in. And I really appreciated the work that I had there. I had a great mentor. And while at the same time I grew up here in Anchorage, I was feeling the call to come back to Alaska. I had the fortunate opportunity to move into my parents' vacation home that they had in Girdwood for a bit. So I came back. A girl followed me back, and we got married. We have two beautiful kids. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. My son goes to Inlet Elementary, and my daughter will go there soon. And all that happening, I took a landscape architecture position with Parks and Recreation here in 2010, and in the first month, I really knew that I found my calling. One of the biggest rewards that I've had in my career is designing public outdoor spaces. The high that I get from it is after we go through a process, we engage the public, we see how we create and design these things, and then you transition into observing all of your clients, the people of Anchorage, appreciating these spaces. And that's all I need. It does a lot for me, and I have a lot of staff that falls into that category too, and we plan to continue to make things better here in Anchorage. And I think a lot of it just has to, within the architecture and engineering industry, I feel there's a lot of ego, and when you do public work, that ego is squashed, and you start listening to those that you serve, and that empowers you to do a better job. So every time we go into a project or a planning process, our staff's ego comes with us, but then it always turns into a product that's exactly what Anchorage needs, and we just merely help. And I believe that parks are not a luxury. They are critical for a vibrant and equitable community, and I think we have, I'll admit, we might have more than we can handle here in Anchorage, but I think that's a great thing. I know it was very influential in myself growing up here in this great city, and I want everyone to have a better experience than I did, and I want to shape their lives to make things better. That's a little bit about me, and if you have questions, I'm open it up.
Okay, I do have one question right now. Mr. Dyson.
Thanks. As you know, we're profoundly impacted by the quote homeless population and all that. And I enjoy a realistic appraisal of all that and the way forward. Another pet project of mine, and it came up in the climate mitigation thing that we adopted, and that's reforestation.
Sure.
Making incentives for people to not clear cut lots, and then how can we make incentives to plant trees and all that kind of thing, and so on. And if you've had any experience in those, we don't have to talk about it now, but I'd be glad to know how you see we could proceed.
Sure. A brief response to that is I just like I talked about that paradigm shift of designing communities for people instead of cars. I've even seen that change here in Anchorage in the past 10 years with not only public development but private development. People are understanding when they come into a property, it already comes with a lot of value as it relates to the indigenous landscape that's there, and that should always be embraced. We definitely at Parks and Recreation will continue to embrace that. You can see the mistakes that we've made over the past 50 years. If you look at these parks that are it's grass and it's surrounded by bollards, before those bollards were put in, there was trees there that would have served the exact same purpose. So that was a critical error on our part, and I aim to not make those same mistakes again.
And if I make it,
Sure.
In Colorado, were there any successful efforts to get both commercial and private people to replant trees and all that?
Yeah, they look at it a little differently. So typically the development there is happening in a kind of like a prairie setting, so there's not a lot of trees, and it's hot there. Trees help. Everyone's planting trees. Any area that's getting developed, they have criteria that requires a certain amount of trees, and they really embrace it. Homeless. So, yes, it's an issue, and unfortunately, it has a huge impact on parks. I think that what we need, at least from what I can do, is to continue to bolster approaches, this SEPTED approach, which is crime prevention through environmental design. So this is us having clear, so for example, let's look at the Chestnut Creek Trail, one of our worst case scenarios. We've gone in a 100-foot corridor and opened up sight lines. We've re-lamped every light in there so you have better visibility. So essentially, we're taking steps to keep, one of the best ways, if you're thinking of take back our parks, it's to activate them. It's to get the positive activity happening there, which pushes out the nefarious activity. So making reasons why people should go to parks, why they should feel safe there, and kind of empowering that will help combat it at some level.
Yep. And about cleanup.
Yeah, we have a dedicated workforce that works towards that. I could absolutely see in the moment it getting 25% bigger with what resources Nancy's team as well as APD's team has. If we were to go beyond that 25% metric, we would need to see those other organizations bolstered as well. Otherwise, I think we would find a spot where we're not working well together.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Question, but I guess I want to back up on that. Maybe I don't quite understand that. So you have resources to do more cleanup than you can because the MIT.
So if we, let's say we tried to double our workforce to say 35 people dedicated to going out and cleaning up these camps, the process that's set up with the posting by the CAT team and the way that's all orchestrated, there wouldn't be enough work for us to do. But I think if we did 25%, that is a spot we could do that they would still be able to manage what they're laying out for us of when we can go in to abate the camp. That's as much as we could grow without them growing too.
Okay, so you have a little slack.
We have a little slack. Yeah.
Okay. I just look at that. I think more sense of what you've been doing for the last 10 years.
Sure.
Okay, you're an artist, landscape architect. All right. What do you know about Van Gogh and stuff like that? Aren't you in charge of those buildings as well?
So
And you may know a lot, so I'm just
I'm never going to pretend that I know everything, and that's why we get to work with 350 great people. So I will definitely rely on resources that currently exist with any managements and facilities. One thing that I've learned about my leadership styles, I have a servant leadership style. I want to position everyone and get rid of barriers, provide technology, resources for all staff so they can do the best job they can. And I'll look at any other thing that really hasn't fell under my typical purview. I'll take the exact same approach and hope for success.
One other question. So Troop 104, that's the one that sells warehouse loads of popcorn and goes to Hawaii. Were they doing that when you were there?
No, I spent all of we raised revenue when Ferrande was actually always below zero. I sold pins down here during Ferrande. That was our.
That didn't get to Hawaii.
It did not. We did not go to
They
Hawaii.
took a new business plan after you left.
Yeah, things definitely changed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Josh, trail connectivity is something that is a priority for me. It's also a priority for Parks Foundation that we're part of. And this idea of being able to get from basically the airport or even Kincaid Park to Palmer at some point without ever leaving the trail system, and then south as well. The Chester Creek Trail in particular, I feel like there's been more emphasis put on sort of what I consider the South Fork of the trail, the one that goes through the university. Mm-hmm. How would you get from the North Fork that stops at Nichols Street to Chauncey Muldoon Park?
Yeah.
How would you do that without leaving the trail? And then how would you get from Chauncey Muldoon Park to the trails on the highway?
Okay, so I have answers for both of those, and they're both costly, but they're things that we do need to pay attention to, and I think we're, just to back up a little bit, we're really beneficial that we had people within our municipality, such as Vic Fisher, that established these greenbelt corridors, so we had them. In Chester Creek, they didn't make it all the way, and it's too bad that they didn't, but the opportunity in the moment lies with wayfinding that we could do on streets. But I think a long-term solution is we want to have that seamless connection for both summer and winter use. And to do that appropriately, we actually would need to procure a fair amount of residential properties along the Chester Creek corridor to get that connection. And I've also been working with Mr. Schutte and Cook Inlet Housing and Pfeffer Development of creating some of those connections from Chancenoux to the elementary school that's there. And so some of that's already starting to happen, but we need to have a planning effort to establish opportunities and constraints as it relates to that connection. And then the best approach then is to start getting into what our department is new to us is these federal AMATS dollars of how we can realize this full connection. And then, so you get to Chancenoux, then how are we going to get to the Glen? The opportunity there is that boundary with
Federal.
J-Bear and all of the residential properties. There's an opportunity there. I'm not sure how to make that happen, but I trust with all the smart people that we have here in Anchorage, we can figure it out.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Mr.
Sure.
Chair? So there is I'm trying to think where I heard this, probably Northeast Community Council or someone else, talking about conversations with our U.S. senators, basically, trying to get J-Bear to give us a way through.
Mm-hmm.
Have you engaged in any of that?
No.
Okay.
I've seen it in
Chris behind you says he has. How realistic is this? I mean, my impression is it's very difficult to get, literally take an act of Congress.
Through the chair, so a lot of this conversation has happened primarily at the local level, not at the congressional delegation level yet.
Okay.
And what started it, something you're probably aware of, and I know Northeast Council, the Community Council is, the training areas on J-Bear have been systematically closed over the past year to public recreation, public access. The iSportsman app has gone away. Assemblymember Welton, myself, Mr. Falsey, we met earlier this year, late in the summer actually, with Colonel Staples and his staff as they briefed us on the thinking behind the military installations decision to close these areas and which areas they proposed not to close.
Yeah.
Particularly around the Dome Trail. One of the big ones that stood out to us that they proposed to close is the TA that's adjacent to the neighborhoods that run along Muldoon. As you probably know, if you live back there, you can actually get from Bicentennial Park all the way to Plant 2A, but it's on a utility easement that exists on the military land. So what we requested from Colonel Staples is that he go back to DOD and work with their legal team to see if they can bifurcate that particular training area into two, and therefore close the eastern one, but leave the western one that abuts those neighborhoods and has the easement in it open. At the very least, that protects the public access, not necessarily a full-built Chester Creek type trail, but it's the first step, and we're working that through.
Yeah, okay, so to follow up that, I think that's a good first step, but I do think long-term, we want to actually try to find a way, and it's happened in other communities where through an act of Congress, you actually transfer a little bit of the military land. And it would just be enough for a trail corridor, but if it required closing that particular training area, I think that would actually be pretty popular with the neighborhood too, because that is right up against it. You can hear, I mean, if they're firing a 50 cal or even just small arms there, you can hear it all night long. They do these night trainings sometimes, and people are like on next door. It's like, why are there gunshots in my neighborhood? It's like, well, you're next to a firing range. Yeah. And Jaber has tons of firing ranges, so it's not like they have to use that one necessarily. So I'm hopeful we can keep moving forward with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. So I've kind of a couple bullet points to walk through. Yesterday, I was on Carluck Street, and I managed to run into your staff picking up a very large pile of red bricks.
Okay.
So the campers on Carluck Street were intending to build a fire pit on Carluck Street, the right-of-way between 3rd and 4th. And then your staff went immediately up to Party Hill across from the Oleva properties, which I had just walked through because I was on a tour. And that's some pretty scary work, and it's overwhelming, and it's taking up all the growth and bandwidth of the department, right? It's just amazing how much we push into that, rightly, because it's who needs to respond. However, you have a mission, right? The mission is to ensure that there's good green open spaces and the public has a way to stay healthy and fit within the parks and all of that. So there's only one thing. The first question is, how do you protect that balance? Like, how do we ensure that there's some kind of visionary growth in the parks work that's other than the existential trauma that we're trying to work through? That's one. And then I sent you a fun text the other night about a Craigslist posting that I found that someone was offering $25 per 8-inch choke cherry. They would pay you $25 to come cut an 8-inch choke cherry on your land because they could make planks that they could build with. So what is your thoughts on the approach to the choke cherry issue, which gets to the replanting and reforesting, but at the same time protecting? And then the final one is, what are your thoughts and what is your plan for citizen-led approaches to park improvements, park growth, and all of that?
Okay. Well, the first one's the most difficult of it. I guess in the moment it feels like we already have struck that balance because we are providing the appropriate services throughout Anchorage from the Parks and Recreation perspective. The blight on our parks and trails as it relates to trash and some of this activity doesn't go unnoticed. It happens, and we do the best that we can with the resources that we have to take care of it. And again, I would go back to what I recommended before, that we do have an opportunity to make that cleanup effort a little bit larger with other resources staying the same that they are. If you're seeking an increase in that, that's money, and that's a decision for this body of how that happens. I can't close on that one.
Well, my thoughts, if you will, would maybe we track the work you're doing in parks with abatement and the work you're doing everywhere else. Because Carluck Street is not the parks, but your staff are everywhere and getting sucked into all kinds of duties that we need, and they're the right people for the job, but it isn't actually advancing the progress of our parks.
Yeah,
right.
And I think that if you look at our budget did increase from what we were doing before. That I would say does accommodate and justify that. And I get it. It's one city. Sometimes you don't need to worry about those property lines as it relates to parks versus right of way. It's all the same. These are municipal employees making things better. But yeah, it is a challenge. Absolutely.
And then, so the choke cherries and the citizen-led approaches.
Okay, so choke cherry. We're currently working on a strategic plan, so we have a more holistic approach towards this. What we've been doing is, in my opinion, more of a knee-jerk reaction to it. So we've done I'll cite a couple examples. About 7 years ago, we tackled the connector trail from Takishla Park to Nichols Park. It's about a quarter-mile long trail. We had 30 youth employment and parks kids there for 2 straight weeks. We mechanically removed every single specimen of bird cherry within that entire corridor. That's what we did. We didn't think about, oh, should we put in some supplemental planting? What else might grow here? What's going to compete with the species? We just tore everything up, walked away. We did a great job. Go look at that space right now. It's all back. Then we have this other example. We have our nonprofit partner, the Anchorage Park Foundation, which has Mr. Stollard, an invasive weed specialist, and he takes his approach. Picks an area within the Chester Creek Trail. We've had this process that we established, which has been critiqued, but we had a process. He went in, got permission from the community, sprayed all of those understory of the chokecherry that's growing within the Chester Creek corridor. It all dies, then it looks like a blight on the space. But then our crews come back in, clean it all up, but guess what? 2 years later, it's all growing back. So this is where I get into this holistic approach. So we're doing research of what's going to compete well with this from an indigenous existing plant material perspective. Because the one thing that you got to take a look at, and I feel very comfortable saying this, you go look at Far North Bicentennial Park, it's an established ecosystem that's been there for a long time. It has not been disturbed by man, minus all of the network of trails that go through there. Chester Creek corridor, that entire corridor, the creek channel, everything's been disturbed by man. So what happens then? Then natural reforestation happens here in Anchorage, and it starts with cottonwood trees. Cottonwood trees start growing in these disturbed gravelly areas. They start growing, they get really tall, constantly leaves are coming down, so it's increasing that organic matter. Then all these birds that come to our community, they fly around town, they go down to South Anchorage and parking lots and residents everywhere around town where this bird cherry exists. They eat the berries, they go roost up in these cottonwood trees, the droppings come down, then this new species outcompetes the ferns, the cranberry, the alder, these other species that would typically start to grow underneath these cottonwoods. So it becomes the dominant, so you have essentially 2 monocultures in these disturbed areas coming up. The cottonwoods, then the bird cherry. We haven't experienced what's going to happen in 50 years if we just let it happen, but I think we've all come to, for the most part, this general agreement that this species causes problems, and I think it's got a little bit more momentum, honestly, because of public safety and the homeless issue, because this monoculture grows so dense and so fast that it actually creates a lot of these hidden spaces within our corridors, parks, etc. So this all just gets back to just removing it, just spraying it doesn't work. We have to have a holistic approach where we're coming in and planting things to compete with this. So we get back to something that is much more native than what we're experiencing now. And I love the idea of this person that would go around and pay money to take these out, because eradication is not on the table. Control is, but eradication can't be on the table until we have a multifaceted approach that eliminates the species collective.
So what I heard we need to get rid of cottonwood trees.
I heard we need to get rid of the birds.
Okay. Sorry. And then the last point I'm starting to dominate.
birds.
It's the idea of citizen-led approaches. You know, that trail that we got
Yeah,
through,
yeah.
the trail there. What's your theory or thoughts on how that's going to grow?
I would say, I mean, you compare us to any other department, I think we excel in this in the moment, and we could do better at it. And our volunteer program and our youth employment program, I think they really make a huge difference beyond the effort specific. Both of these programs create future stewards of our parks. All these volunteers, all these kids that work in youth employment and parks, they get what it takes to take care of the park, what it takes to build a trail. They start to embrace that, and that changes the culture of our community of how people see our outdoor spaces and how important they are for us. It's amazing watching our youth employment and parks program and seeing how there's these families that they've never even been to Kincaid. They've never been to Far North Bicentennial Park. They didn't know they could go biking there. They know about it now. They know what it takes. And then I look at the volunteer program the same way. And growing up here in Anchorage, I was fortunate enough to be in a family that encouraged this volunteer approach. I plan to do that with my kids, and I think that that's also a culture shift that needs to happen with our community collective, is parents need to recognize the importance of that. Get their kids started at an early age. We can't convince everyone to go out and volunteer. There's more volunteers than we can handle right now with our one volunteer coordinator. There's options through the Anchorage Park Foundation to bolster that. And I think that this volunteer approach could impact a lot of other departments as well, and I think others could learn from the approaches that we do take. But I think it helps on so many levels. And again, just getting back to we have this team of designers, the ego, any public process, any engagement with those that we actually serve positions us to deliver a product that really works for the community that we're working on.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, so I'm frustrated. Shooting this time last year, I asked you to help me prepare the maps and stuff to get something in Senator Sullivan's office to work on. You didn't do a very good job, but Rada did. And I took those to him and met with Sullivan and his staff on this land swap on the land east of Malden. So I don't understand why you didn't mention that, because I tried to keep you posted it. And I met with Sullivan's staff here about 3.5 weeks ago, and it's still perking, and he's on the Defense Appropriations Committee, and he's already gotten some land for us here in the city, small pieces and stuff. And I got a note from him Wednesday. Things are moving a bit, apparently slowly, but so your comment that we haven't made contact with the congressional delegation is surprising to me. And then I've told the Assembly a couple times over this year that we're working on it a bit. And by the way, there's several pieces of the Klugna homes on the east boundary of Jaybird that Jaybird like to have. Now, our best thing is we can just talk the military into giving us the land, and we can sweeten it up and say we'll build some more housing across, adjacent to the beach, the basin, and so on and so forth. But if the push gets to shove, there is some land that we could transfer. Cook Inlet Region, Surrey, is also interested, in that sort of thing. So that's perking. I haven't heard anything specific or anything that's scheduled, but Sullivan says, the best way to get is DOD leaning our way, and then they'll go to the base of the, commander and so on and so forth. So anyways, there's something perking there. Probably won't happen during my time with you all, but I hope it keeps going. And we don't have we'll seldom have a better opportunity than having Sullivan in his position, and his connections with military. So anyways, that's happening.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for wanting to take on the responsibility of managing this department of buildings. 350 employees. It's obviously no cakewalk to do that. But my question is, and I'm not a marathoner, but I thought the mayor's marathon used to have a route of east of,
Sure.
just east of on the military.
We had a problem with a bridge, and we have since made a new route, and we won't have to deal with that problem anymore.
So, but we used to get a temporary permit for the mayor's marathon. So, they wouldn't have to seed, thousands of acres if they just gave us at least that route, so we could build, maybe a trail along there. So, for our connectivity, maybe there's a compromise that we can make there. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you. And to close this off, Mr. Shute.
So, thank you, Chairman. So first, I'll speak in my official capacity as technically Josh's boss. I couldn't be happier with finding somebody in the municipality who wants to step up and fill this very large role, and I can't think of a better person to do it. So we're very excited about this opportunity. Mr. Dyson, I apologize. We have not spoken to the delegation, and I didn't want to step on your toes by indicating that we have. I am aware of your interest in this issue, but we have personally not spoken to the delegation.
But it represents that, we were all together.
Fair enough. stepping outside my role and talking to you today is just regular old Chris Schutte. I've known Josh a long time. He went to high school with me, or I went to high school with him. Didn't have a chance to play him on the soccer field. I think we're a year apart. But I have no doubt he would have clobbered me. You won't find anybody who's more accessible, easier to talk to, more empowering, and more compassionate, I think, in the entire municipality. I couldn't be happier for the city, for our city, knowing that Josh has got this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, you just look at his shoes. His feet big enough to fit, I think.
I don't think John and I actually have the same size foot, just larger stature.
All right, with that, we'll look forward to Tuesday. Thanks.